Talks between the Mayor of Greater Manchester and the British government are set to resume as the two sides continue to clash over the level of financial support to the region if new restrictions are imposed. A series of vigils will be held across France today to remember the teacher who was murdered near his school on Friday. The victim was apparently targeted for showing cartoons of the Prophet Muhammad to his pupils. A convicted murderer who confronted an armed man on London Bridge last year while on day release will be considered for parole 10 months early. Stephen Gallant intervened to stop the attack, which left 2 people dead. Coronavirus restrictions in Australia's second largest city have been eased after more than 100 days of lockdown. People living in Melbourne can now travel further as coronavirus cases start to fall.
Here's the closing bell brief for Friday, October 16th. I'm Charlie Turner for the Wall Street Journal. Stocks closed out the week with a mixed session. The Dow Jones Industrials rose 112 points to close at 28,606. The Nasdaq Composite fell 42 points. The S&P 500 rose a fraction of a point. The indexes were little changed for the week, each gaining less than 1%. Investors are grappling with questions about the strength of the economic recovery, the spread of the coronavirus, and the status of negotiations in Washington over additional fiscal stimulus. At the same time, investors were cheered by data showing a 1.9% rise in retail sales in September. It's the 5th straight monthly gain and far better than what analysts were expecting. The nation's budget deficit tripled to a record $3.1 trillion in the latest fiscal year, according to the Treasury Department. Contributing to the widening gap, a surge of federal spending to combat the coronavirus and cushion the U.S. economy, coupled with a drop-off in federal revenue amid widespread shutdowns and layoffs. And shares of Pfizer rose nearly 4% after the company said it could be ready to apply for emergency use authorization of its COVID-19 vaccine by late November.
We're in the Vietnamese capital of Hanoi, where Japan's Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide will hold summit talks on Monday with his Vietnamese counterpart, Nguyen Xuan Phuc. This is the first overseas trip by a Japanese Prime Minister since the start of the coronavirus pandemic earlier this year. Suga also plans to visit Indonesia during his 4-day trip. As a precaution, the number of Japanese government officials traveling with the Prime Minister has been limited. Security and economic ties are expected to be on the agenda when Suga and Phuc sit down for talks. Suga hopes to reaffirm Japan's cooperation with Vietnam in creating a free and open Indo-Pacific region based on the rule of law. This comes as China has steadily increased its activities in the South China Sea. Suga is also scheduled to give a speech outlining Japan's policy on the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Vietnam will chair next month's ASEAN summit. Vietnam is looking for more cooperation from Japan amid territorial disputes with China in the South China Sea. People in Hanoi are expressing high expectations for the summit talks.
I hope that the summit talks will lead to bilateral defense cooperation that can help protect Vietnam's sovereignty in the South China Sea.
Vietnam intends to strengthen ties with Japan through defense cooperation, and Hanoi welcomes Japan's intention to contribute to peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. The Vietnamese government wants to attract more capital investment from Japan. Some people voiced hope that bilateral ties will boost economic activity, which has been hurt by measures implemented to deal with the coronavirus pandemic.
I hope this visit can create more job opportunities in Japan for Vietnamese workers. I also hope it leads to building new infrastructure like the metro project in Ho Chi Minh City, which Japan has invested in.
Japan is the largest recipient of workers from Vietnam. The country's leaders are expected to ask the Japanese delegation for further cooperation. Many countries in Europe are seeing another wave of coronavirus infections. Paris and other parts of France have introduced nightly curfews to curb the spread. The daily tally of new cases surpassed 32,000 in France on Saturday. The central area of the capital is bustling with people. But as the clock strikes 9 p.m., few people remain. The streets are nearly deserted. In some areas hit hard by the virus, nightly curfews from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. will stay in place for at least 4 weeks. One restaurant in central Paris has started offering dinner an hour earlier than usual. All the customers leave by 9.
The number of customers had finally started to recover in autumn, but now we get this shock. I think it is going to be a very difficult time for us and many other restaurants.
New cases are also rising again in other countries, shooting past levels seen during the spring. In Italy, nearly 11,000 cases were confirmed on Saturday. It was a single-day record. Germany and Poland also reported one-day records. Belgium will implement a curfew from midnight to 5 a.m. on Monday. All bars and restaurants must stay closed for 4 weeks. The foreign ministers of Belgium and Austria have both tested positive for the virus. They sat next to each other at a meeting of EU foreign ministers in Luxembourg earlier this month, but it's not confirmed that the two cases are related. 10 taxi companies in Tokyo are applying to the government to change the rules to allow drivers to reject customers who refuse to wear face masks. The taxi business has been having trouble with customers who won't wear masks without any justifiable reason. Under Japanese law, drivers are basically not allowed to refuse customers. Taxi companies have already taken extensive measures against coronavirus infections. The Hiromaru Kotsu taxi company has 675 cars. Many of its drivers are feeling anxious.
My wife and I are expecting a baby next year. I'm worried that if I'm infected with the virus, it could end up harming my wife.
The company counted the number of customers without masks during a 3-day period last month by analyzing images from dashboard cameras. It found that about 20% of more than 2,800 customers didn't wear masks.
It's a desperate measure to refuse rides to customers. But the company has to thoroughly enforce this measure to protect the health of its employees and its customers.
The Transport Ministry is considering the application for a change of rules. If approved, it would likely spread throughout the bus and taxi industries. The Tokyo Metropolitan Government confirmed 132 new cases on Sunday. Nationwide, total cases have reached nearly 94,000. More than 1,600 people have died. Turning now to the U.S. presidential election, voters are already casting early ballots in unprecedented numbers, with just over 2 weeks before the November 3rd vote. Long lines have been forming outside polling stations in some states. According to the Associated Press, more than 22 million people had voted by Friday. That's nearly 40% of all those who voted early in the 2016 presidential election. 24% of the early voters were registered Republicans. More than double that number, or 55%, were Democrats. The increase is attributed to wider use of voting by mail because of the coronavirus. But there have been problems in parts of the country. Some ballots were sent out to the wrong people. Vote counting may take much longer this time, as some states will accept ballots postmarked right up to Election Day, and some are not used to handling a large number of mail-in ballots. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden's camp is calling on people to vote early. President Donald Trump's camp opposes voting by mail, but it too is calling on people to vote early. Those were the stories for this hour.